If we had to choose just one word to describe the Ibis Ripmo, it'd be fast. If we had to choose 2 words, it'd be fast. The Ripmo accelerated like it had no business doing, devouring the southwest Utah chunk on the downhills and scaling technical climbs with a liveliness normally reserved for bikes with less travel. It perfectly represents the geometric sweet spot the long travel 29er category has finally found.
I was very impressed. Yeah, this bike was amazing. For the travel it has, for the wheel size, I mean, I just felt like I could climb really well on it. Descending, I was super impressed with on the chunkiest part of the long travel loop, just how much control I felt like I could keep over it while I was sort of picking my way through the chunk. I could just sort of like maintain the speed I felt comfortable at and just really felt like I was not getting taken for a ride, which is easy to do on that section of course.
Yeah, I was really blown away by it. I thought that for its intent and its travel and its wheel size, that it was an incredibly comfortable, downright fast bike to get around the trails that we were riding on.
Yeah.
Much faster than I expected.
Yeah. I mean, when I hopped on this thing, I was like immediately blown away by how fast it accelerates. I mean, you get on the pedals and it just surges forward.
Surges.
In a way that it has no right to do. Like, I feel like this bike, I've been on a Ripley LS for a while because it was my dream build a few years ago. Okay. And that bike is fast, but I think this is faster.
I'm surprised that you're saying this is faster with more travel.
It just, I mean, maybe part of it's the updated geometry too. Like, I'm just more comfortable in general moving on this bike. The steep tube angle is steeper. But I mean, even in terms of just the suspension action, it's so efficient when you're on the gas.
Yeah. We've talked about sort of the hovercraft effect of certain bikes and designs, and this one really, you can pedal as hard as you want into really rough stuff, and it just maintains traction and absorbs all of that while just continuing to keep you moving forward. Tons of traction, really good acceleration behavior. It's not the analogy we use a lot of times when we're talking about travel, like it feels like it has more travel than it is. This almost seemed like an inverse of that to me. Not the travel, but that it felt like less bike than it is. Some of the bikes with this travel, this geometry that we've got here are real sleds.
Yeah.
And this felt lively and nimble and easy to get around on, in spite of what the numbers may say.
Yeah, I was going to say very snappy, and I think, you know, a kind of a fair comparison would be to the SB150, which we also tested in terms of travel and wheel size, and it just feels so much different than that bike.
Yeah, totally different riding style required for the SB150 and for this. I mean, that bike, it's gotta go fast. It has to go fast. And this one doesn't. You can ride this with precision and control at slower speeds and ride really effectively that way.
And it's fun.
Yeah, and it's fun to do. I think like we have this really crazy, chunky, steep, like difficult descent on our loop. And this and the Fazari are the 2 bikes that I felt most confident descending that on because they're both really precise feeling.
Yeah, that's exactly the experience I had with the Ripmo. I rode that section twice on this. I did the loop twice on this bike, and I just could not believe how I could just kind of like, I couldn't believe how slow I can go, which doesn't sound great for me, but it's a really technical section, and I feel like parts of it I really did have to kind of like slow down and think about it before I dropped in. And
there was a lot of that out there.
Yeah.
And this bike is remarkable at being able to kind of roll up to something, position yourself, and then pop off it or point the wheel exactly where you need it to be, and then let it go. And then, in spite of the fact that it's not quite as slack and as long as some of the bikes that you have here, it still holds its own all the way up into that very warp speed end of things. It's a really confident, planted, the chassis is very stiff. It doesn't feel like there's any lateral wiggle or twang to it. Yeah.
And the rear suspension is really comfortable to descend on at high speeds. It works really well. I feel like Ibis is getting the best that Dave Weigel has to offer. Like of all the of all of his designs that I've ridden, which all seem to work really well, I gotta say I think Ibis is getting the best. And it's just, I mean, at some points I almost felt like the rear end was sort of outpacing the front on this bike. You know, it's like a 65/8 head angle, and I think if it was a little bit slacker, it had a little bit of a bigger fork on it, I mean, I think you could go a lot faster on this bike.
It's got a 160 fork. I mean, how much bigger do you want?
All right, I think I'm mostly talking about slackness then. If it was a little bit slacker, you could go faster, but that, of course, would take away from that precise feel that this has.
Right.
Fast, precise, nimble, these are all adjectives that would have never been used to describe a long travel 29er even a few years ago. But the Ripmo represents just how much the category has advanced in terms of fit and feel. Thanks to today's progressive angles, bikes that once handled like Cadillacs now feel like Corvettes.
Compared to an SB150, yeah, it's going to give up a little bit at ultra high speed, but everything is compared to that bike.
Yeah.
Everywhere else in the real world, I think they did a beautiful job of mating that suspension with a very well thought out geometry and just a really cleanly executed frame.
I think it's indicative of what is going on with this long travel 29er category in general. Up until this year, I haven't felt like this is a type of bike I even want to ride. It's always felt just like too much bike for me.
Big.
And this is now, I find myself loving this category, you know, because I feel like I can climb the steep stuff. You know, these steeper seat tube angles are going a long way with this category, and it's just, these are fun bikes for me now, whereas before I would dread riding a long travel 29er.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some of these bigger 29ers that we're riding even this year, though, do require like a really conscious weight shift forward in order to maintain cornering performance. And I felt like this bike didn't ask the rider to do that quite to the extent that some of the other
Like the
ones did.
SB150 for sure.
Yeah.
It took me a while to get used to that, whereas this just sort of doesn't feel like that same body position.
Yeah. It's very intuitive, it carves really well, but it can also sort of slap through tighter corners in a way that I think a lot of those bikes, they can do it, you just have to be on it and make
You
it
have to
do
get
it.
over the front of them to do that, yeah.
Another thing I really like about this bike is that the size range is small to extra large, which is, I mean, it's pretty cool to see them make a small in this 29er.
Yeah.
Kind of opens it up to pretty much anybody to ride.
Yeah, and this is a bike that I think just about anybody could be happy on and go just about anywhere.
Just about anywhere, yeah.
Yeah.
The versatility is really high on this one.
Yep.
It was difficult to find any downsides on the Ripmo, except maybe the price. It'll still cost you more than $4,000 if you want to get into a complete build. But if you do, you can be assured that your money will be well spent on a versatile bike that'll never let you down, regardless of the terrain. Read the full review and check out the rest of this year's Bible of Bike Test videos at bikemag.com.